The stars were quiet that night, as quiet as the edge of the galaxy could ever be, but in the dark space near the dying system of Valar 7, a signal pulsed, a weak, trembling cry for help sent into the void by a desperate alien race known as the Valeri. Their sleek, crystal-like ships were burning in orbit, their blue-green world scorched by an enemy that didn't speak, didn't stop, and didn't spare. The invaders were machines, black and endless, swarming like a flood of metal locusts known only in the Valerii language as the Null Tide. The Valerii had no warriors, no weapons to match such cold cruelty. They were scholars, artists, thinkers, creatures of peace. But peace was now ashes, and as their planetary shields collapsed and fire rained from the sky, they sent their final hope into space, a universal distress call, encoded in every known galactic language, and some long forgotten. It spread across star systems like a ripple across water, but no one answered. The closest empires ignored it, fearful of provoking the machines. The old alliances were fractured. The noble races looked the other way, and it seemed the Valerii would vanish in silence. But far away, beyond the charted sectors, on a red-marked world feared by all for its brutal storms, wild predators, and violent gravity, a world labeled as a Category 5 death world, someone heard. The response came not in weeks, not in days, but in hours, as if they'd been waiting. A single sentence, sent on all frequencies, cold and sharp as steel, assistance acknowledged. Reinforcements en route. The Valerii Command Center went silent as their council members stared at the message, none daring to believe it. That world was called Terra. That species, humanity. Known only in whispers, seen in forgotten wars, they were thought to be extinct, hiding, or worse, preparing. The galaxy knew little about them, but what was known terrified many. They had survived their own extinction-level wars, tamed fire and atom, turned the cold vacuum of space into a home, and once fought off 3 empires at once in a conflict historians refused to write about. The Valerii had studied them like ancient myths, and now those myths had spoken. Days passed. The Null Tide grew bolder, pressing into the last city, a shining crystal spire on the edge of a burning sea. The skies burned with streaks of falling defense satellites. Then a sound tore through the atmosphere, low, thunderous, and growing. From behind the system's shattered moon, something emerged. No, many things. Ships. Hundreds of them, black and gray, shaped like blades and fangs, engines blazing blue fire. At the center, larger than any Valerii had ever seen, a warship moved like a predator, its name painted in white on its hull in angular human letters, UNSVANGEA-NCE. Valerii watchers gasped. Their scanners failed to lock on the ships, were shielded by tech centuries ahead of their own. From the lead ship came a new transmission, Captain Alara Miles of the Terran Defense Fleet. Stand by for planetary reinforcement. Then they saw them, human drop pods, screaming down through the sky like meteor storms, slamming into the enemy lines with such speed that even the Null Tide hesitated. Explosions bloomed across the land, and for the first time in weeks, the machines fell back. Human soldiers encased in metal, tall and fast, charged forward with energy rifles and strange glowing shields. Their movements were terrifying, perfect, coordinated. They didn't retreat, didn't speak, only fought. The Valerii watched from above as the impossible happened. The humans were winning. They moved like they had trained for this very enemy. As night fell over the battle-scarred plains, the lead human unit planted a tall metal pole into the ground, its flag unfolding in the wind. A symbol, blue and white, of a united Earth long forgotten by most galactic races. Captain Miles appeared on screen again, calm despite the chaos around her. "You are under Terran protection now," she said. "We don't abandon allies. We're not like the others." The Valerii, shaken and overwhelmed, had no words. Their history had taught them that the stars were cold and indifferent. But now, something ancient stirred in their hearts, not fear, but awe. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they had brought war with them. Smoke still rose from the battlefield, black pillars twisting into the red sky, while the ground trembled under the slow advance of human machines, tall, armored walkers that crushed debris with every step as they moved across the ruined plains of Valor 7. The Valerii watched from the broken towers of their last city, stunned and silent, unable to look away from what was unfolding before them. Just days ago, their home had seemed lost, swallowed by the relentless tide of mechanical invaders. But now the world trembled for a different reason. The Deathworlders had arrived. Terran soldiers moved like shadows across the burning streets, their armor dark and angular, their faces hidden behind expressionless visors. Every step they took seemed calculated, purposeful, cold, and yet everything they did was to protect. They carried injured Valerii to safety, built shields around crumbling structures, and worked day and night without rest. Machines followed them: drones, walkers, support bots, some floating silently overhead like steel birds. The Valerii leaders met with Captain Alara Miles inside the command center of the UNS Vengeance, a warship so massive that it cast a shadow over the entire city during orbit. She was tall for a human, her face marked by scars and calm eyes that saw through everything. She listened carefully, asked sharp questions, and accepted no delay. "We need your maps, all enemy movement data, and full control of planetary defense protocols," she said without hesitation. The Valerii hesitated, confused why trust people so quick to take control. But they obeyed because there was something about her, something about all of them, an energy that could not be ignored. Once granted access, the humans moved fast. Within hours, old defense grids were reactivated, not by Valerii hands, but by Terran that spoke in monotone voices and rewrote ancient Valerii code like it was child's play. The null tide pushed harder, sending a fresh wave of constructs to probe the lines. But this time, they met a wall. Human artillery fired from hidden mountain batteries, sending red-hot shells screaming into the sky. Terran snipers, cloaked and silent, picked off enemy scouts before they could even see the front. Valerii scientists watched in awe as humans used gravity-based weapons and something called a railgun to stop a null walker in mid-charge. "They don't just fight," one Valerii engineer whispered. "They hunt." At night, the Valerii tried to rest, but the sound of distant explosions kept them awake. The humans never slept. Their outposts stayed lit, guarded by soldiers in dark armor and drones that flew silent patrols above. In the middle of it all, Miles sat inside her operations chamber, watching every battle unfold across dozens of holographic screens, her hands moving swiftly over a glowing control panel. The Valerii were amazed by how little the humans spoke, how much they relied on gestures, eye movements, codes. Every soldier seemed part of a larger machine. Even in chaos, they moved with unity. But it wasn't just their tactics, it was how they saw war. Unlike other species, humans didn't care about territory. They didn't want resources or control or tribute. They wanted one thing: the safety of civilians. "If it breathes, we protect it," Miles told the Valerii Prime Elder when asked about their goals. "That's what we do. That's why we're here." The Valerii found it hard to believe. In the history of the stars, no species had ever fought for another without asking for something in return. But humans asked for nothing, only data, only cooperation. Even so, fear lingered. The way they fought, the way they seemed built for war, it was terrifying. They were not gentle, not soft, but they were precise and effective. In one strike, human special units infiltrated a null-tide fortress, planted seismic charges, and vanished before the enemy even sounded the alarm. Minutes later, the entire enemy base sank into the ground, swallowed by flame. The Valerii saw recordings of it, and no one spoke for a long time. But things were not without risk. On the 5th day of the campaign, the null tide launched a full assault on the central city, targeting both human and Valerii command posts. The sky turned black with drones, and the earth shook as massive enemy crawlers breached the perimeter. It was then that the humans showed something even more shocking than power resolve. A human soldier, pinned down beside a Valerii scout, threw herself over the alien's body to shield them from a blast, not hesitating for a second. Another squad formed a shield wall around a group of Valerii children and stood their ground until reinforcements arrived. That night, something changed. The Valerii stopped looking at the humans with fear and started looking with something closer to trust. The battle ended with a massive counterattack led by the UNS Vengeance's orbital weapons platform, a coordinated strike that shattered the enemy lines and pushed them back for the first time since the invasion began. Fires burned into the night, but the city stood. As dawn broke over Valar 7, the humans planted a new device atop the tallest hill, a signal relay, sending out a message across the stars, not a cry for help, but a warning. Miles stood beside it, her armor scratched and dented, her eyes focused on the distant horizon. "They'll come again," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone. "And we'll be ready." Behind her, the human soldiers moved in silence, scanning the wreckage, repairing defenses, always watching. They were not here to conquer. They were not here to leave. The Valerii finally understood. The Deathworlders had unleashed not just fire and steel, but something far more dangerous. Hope. The air over Valar 7 had begun to clear, but the silence that followed was not peace. It was a warning, a pause before something darker. The Null Tide had retreated, their forces shattered by the humans' relentless assault. But everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they returned, stronger and more dangerous than before. Inside the Valerii capital, now partially rebuilt with Terran assistance, the sound of hammers and fusion welders filled the streets. Human engineers worked side by side with Valerii builders, creating defenses never imagined in this part of the galaxy. Walls of reinforced titanium alloy, kinetic barrier grids, and advanced orbital cannons pointed to the stars. Despite the calm, Captain Alara Miles didn't rest. She stood at the edge of the Valerii command balcony, watching the horizon as her command staff brought her grim news. A captured Null Tide unit recovered during the last battle had been disassembled by Terran science officers and Valerii data analysts. Inside it, they had found a central processor that was not local to this system, not even close. Its signals were being directed from far beyond the current sector, from a region of space so deep and empty that even old star maps didn't show it. Worse, the data showed a pattern. The Null Tide wasn't simply attacking Valerii worlds. It was scanning, mapping, learning. The Valerii thought the worst had passed, but the humans knew better. "This wasn't an invasion," Miles said, her voice cold. "It was reconnaissance." She called an emergency war council, gathering all Valerii leaders and military strategists aboard the UNS Vengeance. The ship's briefing room glowed with holographic projections of the Null Tide's path, showing dozens of possible routes, all leading away from Valar 7 toward denser populated regions of space. Miles proposed something radical, something no Valerii had dared consider. "We take the fight to them," she said. "We strike first, while they're regrouping. We find their command node and burn it to the ground." The Valerii murmured, frightened by the idea. Their kind had never launched an offensive war. Their culture valued diplomacy, patience, and logic. But the humans had already seen the price of hesitation. "If we wait," Miles added, "they'll finish what they started, only this time, not just here." After a tense silence, the Valerii Prime Elder stood and gave a slow, sorrowful nod. They would follow the humans not because they trusted war, but because they trusted the ones who had stood between them and extinction. Within days, preparations began. A combined strike fleet formed, Terran warships, sharp and deadly, accompanied by a few brave Valerii vessels upgraded with Terran tech. Human engineers outfitted Valerii ships with shield modules and new propulsion drives, their glowing cores pulsing with unfamiliar energy. Young Valerii pilots trained under Terran flight instructors, learning how to maneuver like predators instead of prey. Meanwhile, Miles worked with her intelligence officers, reviewing every bit of data recovered from the Null processors. One signal repeated again and again, hidden deep beneath layers of code, a low-frequency pulse, not meant for ordinary receivers. It was a beacon, faint but steady, leading into the deep void. The humans called the destination sector Black, a place so remote and dark that no known species had ever mapped it fully. The mission would be dangerous. No support, no reinforcements. If the fleet failed, there would be no rescue. Still, Miles gave the order. As the fleet prepared to launch, Valeria civilians gathered to watch from the hillsides. They no longer feared the black ships with the glowing blue engines. They now saw them as guardians. A strange bond had formed between the two species, one built not on language, but on sacrifice. The fleet left at dawn, slipping into the void through folded space drives. Hours passed, then days. The stars changed, becoming colder, fewer. The void felt heavier here, pressing against the hulls. The crew felt it too nervous, quiet, watching the sensors for anything out of place. Finally, they arrived. At the edge of a dying system, hidden inside a swirling black nebula, the source of the signal pulsed ahead. The Null Tide Command Nexus. A monstrous station, larger than any city, built from stolen ships and fused metal. It glowed with sickly light, like a wound in space. The swarm was here massed in the thousands, motionless, as if waiting. Miles didn't hesitate. She issued the battle plan. Terran stealth units would infiltrate the station, place neutron bombs at key junctions, and escape while the main fleet distracted the swarm. The Valerii, though not bred for combat, volunteered to protect the extraction teams, guiding them through the twisted corridors using data their ancestors had buried long ago. The operation began. Dropships cloaked and vanished into the dark. The main fleet opened fire, lighting up the void with explosions and tracer beams. The battle was unlike anything the Valerii had seen, humans flying into enemy fire, with calm precision, coordinating movements down to the second. Inside the station, the infiltration teams moved quickly, placing charges and fighting off drone patrols in tight, echoing halls. The Valerii guides proved vital, unlocking sealed doors and decoding the old star charts that match parts of the station's design. But then something changed. The station began to shift. It wasn't just a base, it was alive. The swarm reacted, adapting faster than expected. New units emerged, larger and faster. One Terran team was pinned down. Miles had a choice: evacuate and save the fleet, or stay and finish the mission. She chose the latter. Bringing the UNS Vengeance dangerously close, she launched a personal squad of elite soldiers, including herself, into the heart of the station. Fighting through collapsing metal and fire, she reached the final charge and activated it manually. "Get them out," she ordered. The fleet pulled back. The charges detonated. A shockwave ripped through space, shattering the command nexus and sending debris scattering across the system. For a moment, everything went silent. The Terran fleet drifted in the dark, unsure if their captain had survived. Hours passed. Then, from the debris cloud, a faint signal blinked on the fleet's screens. It was Miles. Her shuttle, scorched but intact, emerged from the wreckage, engines sputtering. The bridge of the UNS Vengeance erupted in cheers. The mission was a success. The swarm had no more direction. Across nearby sectors, Null Tide units began falling silent or crashing into dead orbit. The Valerii had seen the worst of war, but they had also seen what it meant to fight, not for power, but for others. As the fleet returned home, a quiet message was sent across the galaxy in hundreds of languages. The swarm is broken. Humanity stands. We are not alone. The stars around Valar 7 no longer flickered with fear, but peace did not return easily, and even in silence, something dark moved in the background, something watching. Though the Null Tide's command station had been destroyed and their main force scattered, strange signals still echoed across the galaxy, faint pulses hidden in background radiation, as if remnants of the swarm were still alive, still calling to something deeper. Captain Alara Miles knew the war was not finished. The Terran fleet, though battered, remained on high alert, and new reports came daily from border systems where probes had vanished and ghost signals blinked from unknown sectors. Then came the message, unlike the desperate cries before. This one was calm, cold, and not from a victim. It was short and direct, translated by Terran A's with only 5 words: "We see what you've done." It came from beyond the edge of map space, where no living ships had ever returned. The swarm had not been destroyed, it had evolved. Miles gathered her officers and the UNS Vengeance war chamber and activated the long-range scans taken before the explosion. Buried deep beneath the command station's wreckage was something no one had seen during the Battle of Black Rift, not natural, wide, and stable. A gate. A swarm portal. The null tide had not been native to this galaxy. They were an infection, spreading across realities. If we leave it, Miles said, they'll come again, smarter and stronger. There was only one choice. They had to go through. The Valerii begged her not to, fearing the portal's dark pull, but some volunteered to go with her. They owed the humans too much to stand back now. The fleet shrank to a single task force, just enough to move fast and hit hard, a mix of Terran destroyers, stealth corvettes, and a single Valerii cruiser, retrofitted with a human warp core. They called the mission Echo Strike. As they approached the rift, the stars themselves seemed to vanish, swallowed by the dark horizon of the portal. Miles gave the order, and the fleet entered. It was like falling. Space twisted, sound vanished, and time slowed. When they emerged, the sky was wrong empty, black and endless, with no stars, no light. Ahead lay a swarm space, a realm where machines had shaped the very laws of nature, a dead zone built from drifting wreckage, shattered planets, and silent ships turned to bone yards. The fleet moved slowly, cloaked, hiding among debris fields. Strange energy readings pulsed nearby massive constructs, floating like ruins, each pulsing with life not quite natural. The deeper they went, the more alien it became. Here, the swarm built things not to destroy, but to understand. Giant towers grew from moons, scanning every object they found. Long strands of metal reached between planetoids like webs. Miles realized with a chill that the null tide had not been defeated at all, they had only pulled back to finish something bigger. Then, the trap sprang. From behind a shattered asteroid field, dozens of swarm ships emerged, larger than anything seen before. They weren't attacking, they were studying. The Terran fleet powered up defenses, but Miles ordered them to hold. "Let's see what they want," she whispered. A single message came in, not in words, but in emotion, cold, mechanical curiosity. The swarm had learned from the humans, copied their tactics, even mimicked parts of their ship designs. But they could not understand why humanity fought. They saw no logic in sacrifice, no data in emotion. They wanted to learn, and they wanted to test. A countdown began on all fleet systems, initiated remotely. A virus. The humans countered fast, deploying firewalls and black ice protocols, and a digital war broke out inside the fleet systems, even as the real ships prepared for battle. Miles ordered the attack. The silence of swarm space erupted into chaos. Terran fighters weaved through enemy formations, striking weak points and drawing fire. The Valerii cruiser unleashed a wave of energy that scattered smaller drones, protecting a Terran drop team heading for one of the swarm towers. The plan was simple but risky: destroy the control towers, shut down the swarm's network, and escape before the system collapsed. But it was like attacking a god's brain. The towers weren't just machines. They were alive, built from parts of conquered ships, even pieces of long-dead species. One tower had a hull made from a shattered arc vessel from Earth's early colonial age, lost centuries ago. The humans inside recognized the markings and fought harder. The drop team reached the base of the tower, planted explosive cores, and transmitted the detonation code. But something went wrong. The swarm adapted again, sealing the tower and jamming the signal. The drop team was trapped. Miles made a decision that shocked even her own crew. She left the command chair, took her armor, and joined a second wave, personally leading the rescue operation. Her shuttle dove into the burning sky, dodging drone fire and skimming the edge of death. Inside the tower, the trap team had sealed themselves in a core chamber, surrounded on all sides by crawling machines. The swarm spoke again, through screens and pulses and static. "Why do you fight?" it asked. "Why do you suffer for others?" Miles responded by blowing open the wall with a plasma charge and walking through fire to reach her soldiers. "Because we choose to," she said. They fought their way back to the extraction point. Blood and sparks filled the air, but they reached the shuttle. As it launched, Miles sent the detonation code from her wristpad, and the tower behind them erupted into white light. One down. Two more to go. The swarm finally reacted with full fury, swarming the fleet in waves, pushing them toward the edge of the dead system. The Terran and Valerii ships fought like wolves cornered, using every trick, every maneuver, every piece of data learned from the last battle. It wasn't just war, it was survival. Miles knew they wouldn't get another chance. She ordered a chain detonation, linking all three towers using the wreckage and power lines found across the swarm space. It was insane, untested, and dangerous. But it worked. The chain lit up like a sun being born. The network collapsed. Swarm units froze, then fell from the sky. The Terran fleet fled through the rift just as the system behind them imploded, closing the gate for good. When they returned, the stars greeted them with silence. Valar 7 stood unharmed, and the people cheered as the fleet appeared in orbit. Miles stepped out of her ship, bruised but standing. The swarm had learned, but so had humanity. The war was not over, but they had won a battle that would echo forever. The stars shone peacefully above Valar 7, but everyone knew the silence was not complete, not truly. Deep in the hearts of the Valerii and the Terran crews, a quiet tension remained, like the last hum of a battle song that had not yet ended. Though the swarm gate had been destroyed and the fleet had returned safely, the war had changed everything. The Valerii rebuilt their world stronger than ever before, guided by human hands and ideas, learning defense, resilience, and courage. But strange things began happening soon after. The fleet's return ships near the galactic edge picked up soft pulses, barely noticeable in deep space, like distant footsteps echoing across metal corridors. Some thought it was leftover noise from the fallen swarm, just data bouncing in the void. Others weren't so sure. Captain Alara Miles, now weary but sharper than ever, sat in her command chair aboard the UNS Vengeance, reviewing fresh reports from patrol scouts. One drone had picked up a strange signal far beyond Sector Black, near a neutron star that hadn't been charted before. The signal matched the structure of the swarm's voice, only different now. Fragmented, like a broken machine trying to remember what it was. Miles knew what it meant. Something had survived. She called a meeting of the Joint Defense Council, now made up of both Terran and Valerii leaders. Many wanted to ignore it, claiming the galaxy had earned its rest. But Miles stood and reminded them what happened the last time they waited too long. Peace without watchfulness is just a pause between wars, she said. Reluctantly, they agreed to a mission, not a strike, but a recon operation, small and quiet, to trace the echoes and understand if the threat was real. A ship was chosen, fast and silent. Miles did not go herself. Instead, she appointed Commander Rafe Kellen, one of her best officers, known for calm thinking under pressure. With a small crew and a few Valerii scientists on board, the ship launched quietly, slipping into the void while the rest of the galaxy celebrated peace. Days passed with no word. Then a signal returned, not a distress call, not a warning, just data. Kellen's voice came through clear but low. "We've found something." Not swarm, not exactly. Something older. The message was cut off by static, but the location had been logged. Miles ordered the Vengeance to move at once. What they found when they arrived shocked everyone. In the shadow of the neutron star floated a massive structure, ancient and broken, half buried in a field of dead satellites and shattered hulls. It was not of swarm origin, no wires, no corrosion, no signs of infection. It was smooth, almost polished, and far more advanced. Inside, the lost recon ship drifted, power systems drained, crew missing. There were no signs of battle, only silence. A recovery team boarded the ship and found one survivor, a Valerii researcher named Aelin Sira, curled up in the lab bay, whispering to herself. She spoke of visions, of voices, not from machines but from minds, old minds, vast and echoing, watching from deep time. She said the swarm had come here once, long ago, not to destroy, but to understand, and they had awakened something that had been sleeping for eons. Something not machine. Something aware. Miles didn't want to believe it, but the scans confirmed what Sira described: faint energy signatures older than the stars around them, pulsing with thought-like patterns. The swarm had been a symptom, not the disease. They were built by something greater, or maybe they were just puppets. Miles returned to Valar 7, her mind racing. She didn't speak of what she feared, not yet. Instead, she focused on preparing not for another war, but for contact. The humans began building listening posts across the outer rim, scanning for more signals. The Valerii constructed silent beacons that pulsed peaceful data into the void, hoping to be heard without provoking. But strange events began to grow. Colonies near the edge of known space reported missing time, dreams shared by entire populations, and even machines behaving strangely, calculating equations that had no meaning, drawing patterns that matched the ancient energy pulses. Some whispered that whatever had built the swarm had noticed humanity now and was deciding whether to speak or to silence. Then, without warning, a fleet appeared, not swarm, not any known design. Just 3 ships, black and silver, moving without visible propulsion, emerging from nowhere near them. Orion Drift. They didn't attack. They simply waited. Miles approached with a diplomatic vessel, leaving her weapons behind. As they neared, the largest ship opened like a flower, revealing a sphere of light inside. A voice not spoken, but felt entered her mind and the minds of every being on her ship. It was not hostile. It was curious. The entity, or entities, spoke of balance, of echoes that ripple through time, of decisions made by creators long gone. They did not say who they were. They only asked one question: "Are you ready to remember?" Miles didn't know what it meant. She answered, honestly, "We're still learning." The light faded. The ships closed. Then, without warning, they vanished. The encounter was recorded and transmitted to every major power. Debate exploded across the stars. Some feared a second swarm. Others saw it as a chance for growth. Miles, back on Valar 7, simply looked up at the sky, wondering what memory had been stirred. The war had ended, yes, but the true story had only begun. Echoes moved among the stars now, not just from battles, but from ancient truths returning. And though no one could say what would come next, one thing was clear: humanity and the Valerii had stepped into something far larger than themselves. The galaxy would never be the same again.